On this Friday night, the death of a prince, the tributes to Prince Philip, and the condolences to the Queen.
She could depend on him in a way that no one else could.
Remembering the long life of the Duke of Edinburgh.
He was one of the best royals.
And will the funeral bring another family drama? COVID-19 reaches a critical point in Canada.
Put the brakes on, get this curve under control.
Sounding the alarm as hospitals prepare for a new onslaught of cases.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Outside Windsor Castle tonight, tributes are being left for the Duke of Edinburgh. And inside, Queen Elizabeth II is spending her first night as a widow. The man she married 73 years ago died in the castle earlier today. Her royal duties are now on pause as she begins 8 days of mourning. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Buckingham Palace says Prince Philip died peacefully this morning. He was just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. The official announcement was made just after 12 p.m. local time.
We are interrupting our normal programmes to bring you an important announcement. In a statement, the palace said, "It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband, His Royal Highness, the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh."
He met and outlived a multitude of world leaders and spent decades traveling the world carrying out royal duties, leaving an impression on everyone he met. Former U.S. President Barack Obama wrote today the Duke was kind and warm with a sharp wit and unfailing good humor. Australia's Prime Minister said Philip embodied a generation we will never see again. Prince Philip met nearly every Canadian Prime Minister since 1952, including Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and his son, Justin.
I had the privilege of knowing Prince Philip almost my entire life. The first times I met him, I was just a kid here in Ottawa many years ago. But obviously, over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to have a few more conversations with him. And it is a tremendous personal as well as public sorrow that we all share.
Prince Philip's death was not a complete surprise. He had been sick for weeks, yet his passing has struck a chord with many and represents the beginning of the end of an era in the British monarchy. Our Europe Bureau Chief, Crystal Goomansingh, is outside Windsor Castle for us tonight. Crystal.
Donna, it has been an emotional day here in Windsor. You know, as people reflected on Prince Philip's life, many got choked up and a number actually shed tears. You know, it's after 10:30 at night here, and even still, people are coming by and laying flowers at the gates of Windsor Castle and pausing to reflect not only on the impact Prince Philip had on people here in the United Kingdom, but right around the world. The notice posted on the gates of Buckingham Palace was simple. His Royal Highness passed away peacefully this morning at Windsor Castle. It didn't stay up long, the royal family asking that crowds not gather because of COVID. After 99 years, 73 of them at the Queen's side, Prince Philip's death quickly made headlines around the world. A German newspaper calling him the Queen's greatest support. Tributes spanning far beyond Commonwealth countries.
Prince Philip earned the affection of generations here in the United Kingdom, across the Commonwealth and around the world.
Good night, Grandad. The nation wishes you a good sleep.
To me, he's been part of my life, and his contribution to this country is enormous.
The longest-serving royal consort in British history, Prince Philip had no official role, always 2 steps behind the Queen, but still finding a way to make his mark. Known as irreverent and funny, the Duke of Edinburgh liked to laugh.
I mean, can you get Radio 3 on it?
Over the years, he made some major gaffes, but never apologized.
Change the way in which I react to things. It's part of That's somebody's style.
His style also included a great sense of duty. Philip only retired from public royal life 4 years ago. In February, he was hospitalized, released after a month, and returned to the Queen at Windsor Castle. Flowers and notes are piling up, but the royal family hopes people pay tribute in other ways.
They actually asked them to make donations to charities, to their favourite charities, or indeed charities that Prince Philip was involved with. So obviously they are very concerned that they don't want large crowds gathering and causing a problem.
The prince's death comes as the royal family is fractured. Philip's grandson, Prince Harry, and his wife Meghan living in California after stepping away from royal life.
Well, one hopes that Prince Harry is going to try and get over for the funeral, but I think Harry would very much like to come over for his grandfather. He was very, very fond of him, loved him dearly, and this might well be the opportunity for the family to heal the rift.
Hope, a shared sense of sorrow, can overcome any split between the generations.
Crystal, if the Queen's reign is considered a success, and I think it widely is, Prince Philip was really the joint author of that success. She first met him when she was just a girl, and she'll now finish her last years as Queen without him. It is quite sad, isn't it?
It really is, and that isn't lost on people here as they express sorrow at the loss of Prince Philip. Their thoughts quickly turn to the Queen, not as the monarch who will continue to reign alone, but as a woman who lost her husband.
Prince Philip never wanted a state funeral. Apparently, he didn't want a fuss. And I guess because of COVID, the funeral will be scaled back even more. What do we know about the plans?
Yeah, COVID really will change things. As you mentioned, he didn't want a fuss, and we are still waiting for official details. But whatever happens will be a much smaller gathering. As you mentioned, they don't want people leaving flowers and are encouraging virtual tributes. So we're waiting to hear those exact details, but we do know that he will be laid to rest here on the grounds of Windsor Castle. Donna?
All right. Crystal Goomansingh in Windsor tonight. Thanks. Canada always held a special place in Prince Philip's heart. He visited this country more than any other. Eric Sorensen has a look back at the impact he made.
In 70 years, Philip visited Canada more than 70 times. Such was his attachment to a country vast and glorious.
Niagara Falls.
The first trip with Princess Elizabeth before she ascended to the throne. He was still a Navy commander who valued the Canadian military.
He very much appreciated and admired Canada's contributions to the Second World War.
Canadian O'Kill Stewart, born the same year, was Philip's friend since their school days in Scotland. Before he died, Stewart recalled Philip's passion for this country.
With regard to Canada, I found him just all gung-ho.
One step behind the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh's relationship with Canada was expansive. His devotion to the environment included the Duke of Edinburgh Ecological Reserve in British Columbia. He was a founding member of the World Wildlife Fund.
I don't think that 10 years ago people were conscious of the consequences of some of the things they were doing.
It was very close to his heart. From my point of view, his contribution to wildlife conservation was enormous.
His sponsorship of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards inspired many young Canadians to embrace public service.
Setting goals for yourself to achieve and then digging into yourself, I think maybe Prince Philip realized this is something young people might benefit from.
And along the way, he just enjoyed this country, from the wretched weather to the time the Royals' boat broke down on Manitoba's Red River.
Actually, they had a real good chuckle over the event.
From everyday Canadians to national leaders, there was a fondness for the feisty royal.
An exceptional individual with a lot of color and who played his role as he should be, but he had a way of expressing himself and being quite candid.
The welcome in the Indian villages.
Much has changed in Canada since the early royal visits to Indigenous communities. The connection to the monarchy is changing, and yet to many, the bonds have lasted.
Oh, he's just beautiful.
These very personal connections between the Crown and First Nations people that have continued even as the role of the Crown in Canada has changed over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries.
Philip's fellowship with this country never wavered, especially towards veterans and the military. This was his last visit in 2013.
In a world where there is so much senseless violence, the regiment has an enviable reputation for peacekeeping.
How enduring a kinship? Philip was the Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Canadian Regiment for 68 years. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Well, it is difficult to sum up 99 years in a few minutes. A little later, we will have a deeper look at Prince Philip's life and his 73-year marriage to the Queen. Now, back to the pandemic. Canada's chief public health officer says this country is at a critical point. Over the last week, hospitalizations for COVID-19 increased by 7%. The number of critical care patients jumped by 23%. Ontario appears to be in deep trouble. More than 4,200 new infections were reported there today, and 18 more people died from COVID-19. Ontario hospitals have been instructed to postpone elective and non-urgent surgeries to ensure they have the capacity for COVID-19 patients. Quebec, Alberta, and BC are seeing similar spikes in case counts. Manitoba said today it's at the start of a third wave. And as Michael Couture reports, Canada's chief public health officer says tighter public health restrictions are essential.
Right now, put the brakes on. Get this curve under control.
Canada's top doctor couldn't put it any simpler. Dr. Teresa Tam says the modeling shows we are headed in the wrong direction, as variants spread quicker than vaccines are going into arms. So she's imploring Canadians to respect public health guidelines.
The faster you get on with these measures, the faster you can come out of them.
And it could go even faster as the vaccine rollout ramps up across the country.
I'll look the other way. Okay.
A needle-nervous Doug Ford rolled up his sleeve today. The Ontario Premier urged people to follow the stay-at-home order while they target so-called hot zones with vaccines.
Where we see 60% of the cases in Toronto, Peel, and York, we have some issues in those areas.
The rollout has been criticized in those regions.
I feel like I am doing the government's homework.
Ray Lai volunteers his time to help people navigate Ontario's vaccine booking system. He's also taken to Twitter, calling out the province's rollout.
I honestly don't see a plan. It is policy by press conference. It doesn't do anybody in this province a service at all. And it causes general anxiety.
That anxiety made worse by a directive for Ontario hospitals to ramp down elective and non-emergency surgeries as they prepare for an increase of COVID-19 hospitalizations. And it has the president of the Canadian Medical Association worried.
People in their 30s, in their 40s, who are now being admitted to ICUs, and also who are dying.
Dr. Collins believes COVID-19 variants have completely changed the ballgame, and it's why now more than ever, people need to follow public health guidelines. Michael Couture, Global News, Ottawa.
The United States still has the most cases of COVID-19 and the most deaths, but if you compare it to Canada and adjust the numbers based on population, Canada's situation doesn't look too rosy. At the start of 2021, both the U.S. and Canada were hitting a peak for daily infections. Since then, the number of new infections in the U.S. has dropped dramatically. Canada's rate of new infection is still rising. On a per capita basis, the countries are nearly on par with each other. Yesterday, the U.S. reported more than 199 new cases per 1 million people. Canada is not far behind, 185 new infections per 1 million people. Screening for variants of concern coming up. Has their rise outpaced Canada's ability to track them? For weeks, we have been tracking the rise of the variants. The number of COVID-19 cases linked to them has more than doubled in Canada in the last week. 25,000 variant cases have now been detected. The B.1.1.7 strain, the one first identified in the UK, accounts for over 90% of them. The only way the variants can be confirmed is through genomic sequencing. Now, BC has decided to stop doing sequencing for every suspected case. Robin Gill explains why.
Rogers Arena, the home of the Vancouver Canucks, has become a petri dish, allowing COVID-19 to thrive. The virus has infected most of the players. The team's doctor confirms a highly contagious variant led to the spread.
This virus is tricky, it's changing, and we need to change with it. If we could anticipate what it's going to do next, our jobs would be way easier.
3 variants are making their way through BC's population. Those uncomfortable nose swabs can't specify which variant is at work. It takes genomic sequencing to do the deeper dive. But those tests are complex, take time, and they're expensive. That's why the province's top doctor is putting an end to that extra layer of testing for every case.
We assume that anybody who is positive with for COVID-19 needs to be treated as if they have one of these highly transmissible viruses.
Instead, BC will reserve genomic tests for any unusual clusters in the community and for travelers coming from abroad because the virus will have more variations. Carolyn Colane is leading the new national modeling network. She believes there is value in this new surveillance strategy.
We want to understand what our COVID population is. What's the population of the virus that we're facing? Because that will tell us information about, importations, about the virus's diversity, about maybe risks with reinfection.
As for the Canucks, not every player was tested for the variant, but the team just needed one player to come down with it to know it was bad.
We saw how fast this hit. This virus is very contagious.
The NHL insists Vancouver will finish the season, even though the players are out of practice. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
Still ahead, a heavy police presence in Northern Ireland, along with calls for calm. There's been another night of violence in Northern Ireland. Despite calls for calm, protesters returned to the streets of Belfast, throwing stones and Molotov cocktails at police who used water cannon to push them back. The clashes have erupted over long-standing sectarian tensions brought to life again by COVID and by post-Brexit trade rules. There are more problems for Boeing 737 MAX jets. Boeing has told 16 airlines to address a possible electrical fault in some aircraft before they fly again. The issue was reportedly discovered by mechanics during production. The 737 MAX returned to service in December after being grounded worldwide in March 2019. Changes were made to the automated flight control system after it was determined they played a role in 2 deadly crashes.
He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
Next, remembering Prince Philip, who the Queen first met when she was just a girl. Prince Philip was once asked if he was hoping to reach 100, and he said, "Good God, no, I can't imagine anything worse." He said, "Bits of me are falling off already." He did end up outliving nearly everyone who knew him and might be able to explain him. Those who are still left describe him as an unsentimental realist and a pragmatist. He fell in love with his future wife way back in the 1940s, and that union shaped both the man and the monarchy. Here's Jeff Semple.
On their golden 50th wedding anniversary back in 1997, the Queen gave a rare speech. A public, deeply personal tribute to her husband.
And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim, or we shall ever know.
For more than 7 decades, he stood by Her Majesty's side, always a step behind. Prince Philip holds a unique place in history. No one else served so long as the spouse of a reigning monarch.
They're very much a team, and in the later years they really were dependent on each other much more than we saw in public. Behind the scenes, of course, he was always head of the family, wore the trousers in private.
Not bad for a man who wasn't even British, born in Greece as a member of the Greek and Danish royal families. But after a military coup, his family was banished. In 1939, on the eve of war, Philip enlisted in the British Royal Navy, and during his training was assigned to watch over his distant cousin, Princess Elizabeth. They exchanged letters for 7 years, and after the war, Philip asked King George for permission to marry his oldest daughter.
As onto the famous balcony came the bride and bridegroom.
Their wedding in Westminster Abbey was broadcast to 200 million people around the world. The newlyweds never expected Princess Elizabeth was about to become queen. But after her father died suddenly in 1952, she was thrust onto the throne. Philip forced to give up his promising naval career to assume the full-time job of prince consort. While Elizabeth appeared shy and reserved, Philip was friendly and even funny.
I hope you had a good breakfast this morning, because we may not be through until about tea time this evening.
Well, I think obviously when he first started, there were quite a few people in the establishment, as I say, who didn't really like him. They died away, and as time went on, of course, he got older and older and was very much the establishment himself. And I think he just became more and more popular with the public, mainly for his outspoken views.
But those views also got him into trouble. Whole books were written about his penchant for eyebrow-raising remarks, like the time he asked Indigenous Australians if they still threw spears. And he was infamously impatient with the British press.
Are you well, sir?
Well, do I look ill?
His famous stubborn streak was on full display at the Queen's Diamond Jubilee pageant in 2012. The 90-year-old prince stood in the cold rain for hours, landing himself in hospital with a bladder infection. But the Duke bounced back, visiting Toronto for a quick solo visit in 2013, his final trip to Canada.
We're now going to see the world's most experienced plaque unveiler.
Even into his 90s, the royal workhorse carried out more public engagements than Harry, Will, and Kate combined, supporting nearly 800 different charities. In 2017, at the age of 96, Prince Philip carried out his final public engagement before retiring from royal duties, but was still spotted at family events, including the royal wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, which Philip attended despite still recovering from hip surgery. Philip is survived by his growing family, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, including 3 generations of future kings, all heirs to the British throne. His legacy includes more than 22,000 solo public engagements and a lifetime of service to his adopted country and to the woman who was both his queen and his wife.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Donna Friesen. Prince Philip made over 70 trips to Canada over his lifetime. We leave you with images of some of them. Thanks for watching.